The tropical sky over the Caroline Islands is choked by the black smoke of a dying empire. Beneath this funeral pyre on February 17, 1944, the USS Iowa cuts through the water at 32 knots, her guns silent but already tracking. She is steaming toward a collision that will prove the greatest naval fortress in the Pacific is nothing more than a trap made of islands and arrogance. To understand the violence that is about to unfold, one must first look at the water itself. Truk Lagoon is vast, a 40-mile-wide expanse of calm, deep anchorage protected by a ring of coral reefs and volcanic islands. For decades, this place has been the beating heart of the Imperial Japanese Navy's operations in the South Pacific. It is the forward base from which they launched the attacks that seized an empire. It is a logistical hub where tankers, ammunition ships, and aircraft carriers rest between battles. To the Allied intelligence officers in Pearl Harbor, Truk is a phantom, a place of rumors and fear often described as the Gibraltar of the Pacific. On this particular afternoon, however, the Gibraltar is burning. The American carrier task forces have arrived. For hours, waves of Hellcat fighters, Dauntless dive bombers, and Avenger torpedo planes have descended upon the lagoon. They have caught the merchant fleet at anchor. The scene inside the reef is one of apocalyptic destruction. Dozens of transport ships are sinking. Fuel oil is spreading across the turquoise water, igniting into sheets of floating fire. The air is filled with the black flak of anti-aircraft bursts and the scream of diving engines. But amidst this chaos, a different kind of predator is moving along the perimeter. The USS Iowa, the lead ship of her class and the newest battleship in the United States Navy, is not part of the air raid. She is operating outside the reef, prowling the deep water near the North Pass. She is accompanied by her sister ship, the USS New Jersey, and a screen of cruisers and destroyers. They are not here to bomb stationary targets. They are here to catch the runners. The presence of the Iowa at Truk represents a fundamental shift in the nature of the war, a shift that the Japanese commanders inside the lagoon are struggling to comprehend. For years, the Imperial Japanese Navy has operated under a specific, rigid doctrine known as Kantai Kessen, or the Decisive Battle. This philosophy traces its roots back to 1905, to the Battle of Tsushima, where the Japanese fleet annihilated the Russian Navy in a single afternoon of gunfire. The lessons of Tsushima were drilled into every Japanese cadet for 40 years. They believed that naval wars were decided by a single, cataclysmic clash between battleships. They believed that victory belonged to the fleet that could close the distance, endure the punishment, and deliver the most accurate fire at medium ranges. This doctrine shaped every ship Japan built and every tactic they practiced. They obsessed over optical rangefinders. While other nations experimented with electronics, Japanese engineers perfected the art of lenses and prisms. They built optics of staggering size and clarity, believing that the human eye, trained to perfection and aided by superior glass, was the ultimate sensor. They trained their lookouts to see in the dark, selecting men with exceptional night vision and drilling them until they could spot a silhouette on the horizon long before a radar screen would show a blip. The Japanese naval worldview was built on the assumption that technology was secondary to spirit. They believed in Yamato Damashi, the unique spiritual strength of the Japanese people. In their calculus, a crew with superior fighting spirit and better training could overcome a material disadvantage. They expected the decisive battle to take place at ranges of 10 to 15 miles, distances where their optical superiority would allow them to land the first hits. The tragedy of Truk Lagoon is that the Japanese were prepared for a war that no longer existed. As the Iowa steams past the burning entrance to the lagoon, she is carrying a technology that renders the concept of fighting spirit mathematically irrelevant. Inside her armored plotting rooms, electromechanical computers are humming. On her masts, radar dishes are spinning. The Iowa does not need to see the enemy to kill them. She does not need daylight. She does not need clear weather. The Japanese commanders inside the lagoon know that American battleships are outside. They can see the shapes on the horizon, but they are operating under the assumption that a surface engagement will follow the rules they have studied for decades. They assume that if they can get their ships out of the lagoon and into the open sea, they can use their speed and their optics to fight a running battle. They believe that if they can close the range, their torpedoes, the dreaded long lance oxygen torpedoes, will even the odds. This belief is about to be shattered. The engagement that is forming off the North Pass is not just a battle between ships, it is a collision between two different centuries. The destruction inside the lagoon is horrific, but it is, in a sense, expected. Carrier warfare is known, air raids are understood. What is happening outside the reef is something different. It is the realization of a new kind of surface warfare, one where the enemy is a ghost that strikes from beyond the curve of the Earth. The USS Iowa is a massive machine, displacing nearly 58,000 tons fully loaded. She is designed to travel at 33 knots, making her fast enough to keep pace with aircraft carriers. This speed is a marvel of engineering, achieved by high-pressure boilers and turbines that generate over 200,000 horsepower. But her true power lies in her main battery. She carries 9 16-inch guns arranged in 3 turrets. Each gun can fire a projectile weighing 2,700 pounds, the weight of a small car, over 20 miles. But raw power is useless without accuracy. The Iowa is fitted with the Mark 8 fire control radar and the Mark 1A fire control computer. This system tracks the target, tracks the Iowa's own course and speed, measures the wind, accounts for the rotation of the Earth, and calculates a firing solution in real time. As the Iowa patrols the exit of the North Pass, the crew is at general quarters. The ship is buttoned up. The ventilation is shut down to prevent the spread of flash fires. The men in the turrets are waiting. They can smell the cordite and the oil. They can feel the vibration of the screws turning at high speed. They are waiting for the rabbits to flush. Inside the lagoon, a small group of Japanese ships is making a desperate run for freedom. The light cruiser Katori, the destroyers Maikaze and Nowaki, and the auxiliary cruiser Akagi Maru have weighed anchor. They are steaming hard toward the North Pass, trying to escape the slaughter of the air raids. The captain of the Katori knows the odds are against him. He knows that American aircraft are swarming overhead, but he likely believes that if he can reach the open ocean, he has a chance. He trusts in the speed of his destroyers. He trusts in the night that is approaching. He trusts in the doctrine that says a smaller, determined force can evade or damage a larger, clumsier enemy. He does not know that the Iowa is waiting. He does not know that he is sailing directly into the focal point of the most advanced fire control system on the planet. The strategic context of this moment is heavy. Truk was supposed to be invulnerable. The Japanese propaganda machine had spent years building up its reputation. It was the symbol of their perimeter, the lock on the door to the Japanese homeland. The fact that American carriers are ravaging the anchorage is a shock to the system. But the presence of American battleships operating with impunity right outside the front door is a humiliation. It signals the total collapse of the Japanese defensive perimeter. The absolute national defense zone has been breached. The Americans are not just raiding, they are hunting. As the Japanese column approaches the pass, the lookouts on the Katori scan the horizon. They are using powerful binoculars, searching for the masts of the American ships. They are looking for smoke. They are looking for the telltale splash of a bow wave. On the Iowa, the lookouts are also scanning, but the primary eyes of the ship are electronic. In the Combat Information Center, glowing green lines sweep around circular screens. Radar operators are watching blips of light. They can see the Japanese ships moving through the channel. They can see them clearly, even though the islands block the visual line of sight. The dissonance between these two realities is the defining theme of the engagement. The Japanese are fighting a visual war. The Americans are fighting an electronic war. The Iowa turns to intercept. Her massive turrets rotate. The barrels elevate. The ship heels over as she changes course. Her bow cutting through the Pacific swell. The distance is closing. For the Japanese sailors on the Katori and the Maikaze, the next hour will be a lesson in obsolescence. They are about to discover that the ocean is no longer big enough to hide them. They are about to find out that speed is no defense against radar, and they are about to learn that the decisive battle they have trained for all their lives has arrived, but the rules have changed. The burning lagoon behind them is a tragedy of air power. The open water ahead of them is a trap of surface power. They are caught between the hammer and the anvil. As the Iowa brings her guns to bear, the sun is beginning to dip lower in the sky. The light is golden and hazy, obscured by the smoke drifting from the burning merchant ships inside the reef. It is a scene of terrible beauty. The might of the industrial age is arrayed against the doctrine of the samurai spirit. The trap is set. The Japanese ships clear the pass and enter the open ocean. They turn north, hoping to race toward the safety of Saipan. They are running for their lives, but the Iowa is faster. The Iowa is waiting. And the Iowa does not miss. As the afternoon sun burns through the haze of smoke over Truk Lagoon, the nature of the battle shifts from a massacre to a hunt. The carrier aircraft of Task Force 58 have spent the morning shattering the myth of Japanese invulnerability. They have turned the anchorage into a graveyard of merchant shipping. But amidst the columns of fire and the sinking transports, a small group of Japanese warships sees an opportunity. The chaos of the air raid provides a grim form of cover. The American pilots are distracted by the abundance of targets. The sky is filled with flak and dogfights. In this confusion, the Japanese light cruiser Katori, accompanied by the destroyers Maikaze and Nowaki, and the auxiliary cruiser Akagi Maru, weighs anchor. They are not looking to fight, they are looking to survive. The Katori is a vessel of distinct symbolic weight. She was built not as a frontline predator, but as a training cruiser. Her decks were designed to accommodate cadets, to teach the next generation of officers the traditions of the Imperial Navy. She carries 4 5.5-inch guns and 2 torpedo tubes, a modest armament that makes her ill-suited for a heavy surface engagement. In peace, she was a diplomat, sailing to foreign ports to show the flag. In war, she has become a target. Her captain knows that staying in the lagoon is a death sentence. The American dive bombers are relentless. His only hope lies in the North Pass, the narrow exit through the coral reef that leads to the open Pacific. If he can reach the deep water, he can turn north toward Saipan. If he can make it until sunset, the darkness might hide him from the plains. The Japanese column accelerates. They thread their way through the burning hulks of their own supply fleet. They push their engines to the limit. The Nowaki, a Kagero-class destroyer, is the greyhound of the group, capable of 35 knots. The Katori is slower, struggling to make 18 knots. They are a mismatched wolf pack, limping toward the door while the house burns down around them. High above, American reconnaissance planes spot the movement. The report flashes back to the American flagship. Enemy warships attempting to sortie via the North Pass. This is the moment where history pivots on the personality of a single man. Admiral Raymond Spruance commands the Fifth Fleet. He is a cerebral, quiet intellectual, a man known for his cold calculation and his preference for air power. He is the victor of Midway, the man who positioned the carriers to ambush the Japanese fleet in 1942. By 1944, standard U.S. Navy doctrine dictates that surface ships exist to protect the carriers. If enemy ships flee, you send aircraft to sink them. It is efficient, it is safe, and it keeps the precious battleships out of harm's way. But Spruance does something unexpected. He looks at the report of the fleeing Japanese ships and decides that airplanes are not enough. He wants to close the door himself. He orders the formation of a special surface action group designated Task Group 50.9. He strips the heavy metal away from the carrier screens. He takes the Iowa and the New Jersey, the 2 most powerful battleships on Earth. He adds the heavy cruisers Minneapolis and New Orleans. He surrounds them with 4 destroyers. It is a formation of overwhelming violence. Spruance transfers his flag from the carrier Indianapolis to the battleship New Jersey. He wants to lead the chase personally. This decision is rare in modern naval warfare. Admirals usually stay back, managing the battle from the center of the web. Spruance wants to be at the tip of the spear. There is a psychological component to this gamble. The U.S. Navy has spent 2 years fighting a war defined by aircraft. The battleship admirals have been frustrated, relegated to shore bombardment and anti-aircraft duty. They have built these massive, fast, radar-equipped dreadnoughts, and they have never had a chance to use them against enemy ships. Spruance understands that for the morale of the surface fleet and to send a message to Tokyo, the battleships need to eat. Task Group 50.9 detaches from the main force. The Iowa and New Jersey signal for flank speed. The boilers roar. The 4 screws on each battleship bite into the water, generating wakes that look like highway lanes. These ships are unique in naval history because they are fast battleships. They carry the armor and guns of a traditional dreadnought but possess the speed of a cruiser. They were built for exactly this scenario, to run down enemy cruisers that thought they could escape. As the American giants round the atoll, the geometry of the intercept becomes clear. The Japanese ships have cleared the North Pass. They are in open water, running north-northwest. They believe they have escaped the cage, but they have simply walked into the arena. The first sign of trouble for the Katori is not a ship on the horizon, but a renewed swarm of aircraft. Planes from the light carrier Cowpens and the fleet carriers Intrepid and Bunker Hill have been ordered to slow the targets down. They are the beaters driving the game toward the hunters. Avengers and Hellcats swoop down on the fleeing Japanese column. They strafe the decks of the Akagi Maru. The auxiliary cruiser, a converted merchant ship loaded with troops and supplies, is a tinderbox. A bomb strikes her amidships. She does not just sink, she disintegrates. A massive mushroom cloud erupts from the water as her magazines and fuel detonate. She is gone in seconds, erased from the surface. The Katori, Maikaze, and Nowaki scatter. They maneuver violently to avoid the bombs. The Katori takes a hit, slowing her further. The Maikaze is damaged, but they are still afloat, still fighting, still trying to run to the north. Then the American planes pull back. To the Japanese crews, this might look like a reprieve. Perhaps the aircraft are low on fuel. Perhaps the sun is getting too low. For a brief moment, the horizon is clear. That silence is broken by the appearance of shapes on the southern horizon. At first, they are just gray smudge marks against the clouds. Then, the distinct, towering superstructures of the Iowa-class battleships rise above the curve of the earth. For the captain of the Katori, the sight is the stuff of nightmares. He is commanding a training cruiser with thin armor and 5-5-inch guns. Bearing down on him at 30 knots are two ships displacing 45,000 tons each, armed with batteries of 16-inch rifles. The disparity in force is comical. The Iowa alone outweighs the entire Japanese group 3 times over. Her guns can fire a projectile further than the Katori can even see. But Spruance is not taking chances. He orders the task group to close the range. He does not want a long-range duel. He wants a definitive execution. He arranges his ships in a pursuit curve, cutting off the angle of escape. The destroyers push ahead to screen against torpedoes. The cruisers take the flanks. The battleships take the center. It is a classic stern chase. In the age of sail, a stern chase was a long, arduous affair. In the age of steam and radar, it is a mathematical equation of closing velocities. The Iowa is making 32 knots. The Katori is struggling to make 18. The distance is collapsing by nearly 15 miles every hour. On the bridge of the New Jersey, Admiral Spruance stands on the open wing. He is watching the horizon through binoculars. The wind at 30 knots tears at his uniform. He is calm. Around him, the ship is buzzing with the electric tension of general quarters. The 16-inch turrets are trained forward. The barrels are elevated. Inside the Iowa, the plotting rooms are dark, lit only by the glow of red combat lights and the green sweep of the radar scopes. The fire control men are tracking the blips. They designate the targets. The large blip is the Katori. The smaller, faster blips are the destroyers. The Japanese ships attempt to make smoke. Thick, oily clouds billow from their funnels, laying a white screen across the water. In 1942, this would have been an effective tactic. Smoke blinds optical rangefinders. It forces the enemy to cease fire or close to point-blank range. But this is 1944. The Iowa's radar beams punch through the smoke as if it were air. The Mark 8 fire control radar locks onto the steel of the Japanese ships. The rangekeepers continue to update the solution. The smokescreen is nothing more than a blindfold the Japanese are putting on themselves. The range drops to 25,000 yards, then 20,000. The Japanese destroyers Maikaze and Nowaki realize the danger. They turn. They are not turning to run, they are turning to attack. It is a suicidal gesture of defiance. They intend to close the range and launch their long lance torpedoes. If they can put a torpedo into the Iowa, they might trade a destroyer for a battleship. It is the only card they have left to play. Spruance sees the maneuver. He knows the reputation of the long lance. It is the one Japanese weapon that the U.S. Navy truly fears. He orders his ships to be ready to comb the wakes, to turn parallel to incoming torpedoes. But he does not turn away. He orders the battleships to open fire. The moment hangs in the balance. The sun is setting behind the American ships, casting long shadows toward the east. The Japanese ships are illuminated against the darkening sky. The stage is perfectly set. For the crew of the Iowa, this is the validation of their existence. They have spent months training, drilling, and polishing the complex machinery of their ship. They have endured the boredom of escort duty. Now they have a target in clear water. The admiral's gamble has paid off. He has caught the enemy in the open. He has brought the sledgehammer to the fight. The air power did its job. It flushed the game. Now the surface fleet will finish it. The silence of the chase is about to end. The 16-inch guns of the Iowa and New Jersey are loaded. The powder bags are rammed. The breeches are closed. The fire control officer watches the range counter click down. 14,500 yards. Commence firing. The order travels from the bridge to the turrets. A bell rings, the deck heaves, and the first salvo of the engagement tears the ocean apart. When the main battery of the USS Iowa speaks, the physics of the world seem to suspend themselves in deference to the violence. The 9 massive rifles, each weighing as much as a space shuttle, recoil in a synchronized earthquake. The overpressure from the muzzle blast is strong enough to concuss a man standing on the open deck, distorting the air and creating a shockwave that flattens the sea surface for dozens of yards. Inside the turrets, the breech blocks slam open, ejecting the steaming brass casings while the crews move with the robotic precision of men servicing a dragon. But the true miracle of the Iowa is not the fire and the fury visible from the outside. It is the silence and the darkness hidden deep within the armored citadel of the ship. While the shells are still arching through the stratosphere, climbing to their apogee miles above the ocean, the battle is being fought in a room that has no windows. This is main battery plot. It is buried deep in the bowels of the ship, protected by layers of heavy steel designed to withstand a direct hit. The air here is cool, conditioned to protect the delicate electronics, and smells faintly of ozone, machine oil, and the nervous sweat of the fire control team. In this room, the war is not a visceral experience of noise and smoke. It is a mathematical abstraction. The enemy is not a ship made of steel and flesh. It is a variable in an equation. The Katori and the Nowaki are reduced to vectors, speed, course, and range, fed into a machine that represents the absolute pinnacle of analog computing. The heart of this room is the Mark 1A fire control computer, known affectionately and respectfully by the crew as the range keeper. To the modern eye, accustomed to silicon chips and digital screens, the range keeper looks like a steampunk fantasy. It is a box the size of a large desk, encased in gray metal and glass, weighing 3,000 pounds. Inside, it is a dense, ticking universe of brass gears, cams, differentials, and spinning shafts. It is a mechanical brain. The problem of hitting a moving ship from another moving ship at a range of 10 miles is a nightmare of physics. The target is moving at 30 knots. The Iowa is moving at 32 knots. The wind is blowing across the line of fire. The air density changes the drag on the shell. The rotation of the Earth, the Coriolis effect, causes the shell to drift to the right in the northern hemisphere. Even the temperature of the powder bags affects the velocity of the shot. If a human being attempted to calculate all these variables with a slide rule, the target would be gone before the math was finished. The rangekeeper does it instantly. It integrates the data streams continuously. As the Iowa turns, the gyro compass feeds the turn into the computer. As the ship rolls in the swell, the stable vertical element compensates, ensuring the guns remain locked on the horizon. The machine hums, it clicks, shafts rotate, driving dials that show the generated solution. It predicts the future. It calculates exactly where the Japanese destroyer Nowaki will be in 45 seconds, and it tells the turrets to aim at that empty spot of ocean. But a computer is only as good as its eyes, and this is where the Iowa changes history. The Japanese doctrine of Kantai-Kessen relied on the optical rangefinder. The Imperial Navy built massive towers on their battleships, housing optics with lenses so large they could spot a splash of water at 20 miles. They trained their observers to have night vision that bordered on the supernatural. But an optical system, no matter how perfect, has a fatal flaw. It cannot see through smoke, it cannot see through clouds, and it cannot see over the horizon. The Iowa does not need to see. Mounted high on her superstructure, spinning inside a fiberglass radome, is the antenna for the Mark 8 fire control radar. This device is the invisible eye. It emits a pulse of microwave energy that travels at the speed of light. This pulse punches through the smoke screens the Japanese destroyers are desperately laying. It ignores the haze of the tropical sunset. It hits the steel hull of the Katori, bounces back, and is caught by the receiver. In the Combat Information Center and repeated in main battery plot, this echo appears as a pip on a green oscilloscope screen. The position of the pip tells the radar operator the range to the target with an accuracy of a few yards. The movement of the pip tells them the speed. The Japanese captains on the Katori and Nowaki are maneuvering wildly, changing course and speed to throw off the American aim. In a visual fight, this chasing the salvos tactic works. The enemy has to observe the turn, re-estimate the range, and adjust. It creates a lag loop. But the Mark 8 radar tracks the turn in real time. The operator keeps his hand wheels turning to keep the pip centered. The data flows into the rangekeeper. The brass gears spin. The solution updates automatically. The guns of the Iowa follow the Japanese ships like magnetic compass needles tracking north. The lag loop is erased. The psychological impact of this technology on the Japanese sailors cannot be overstated. They are operating in a paradigm where smoke means safety and distance means security. They believe they are hidden. They believe that at 14,000 yards, in fading light through a smokescreen, the Americans are firing blind. They do not realize that to the men in main battery plot, the Katori is stripped naked. Every change in helm, every burst of speed is instantly registered. The Americans are not guessing, they are measuring. As the first salvo from the Iowa hangs in the air, the radar operators watch the A-scope. They are waiting for the splash. When the 16-inch shells hit the water, they throw up columns of water 200 feet high. These geysers are dense enough to reflect radar waves. The operator sees the pip of the target, and then, seconds later, he sees the momentary flickering pips of the shell splashes. If the splash pips appear on top of the target pip, it is a straddle. If they are short or long, he calls out a spot correction. Up 200, right 5. This feedback loop allows the Iowa to walk her fire onto a target she cannot visually see. It turns the art of gunnery into a science of destruction. On the bridge of the Iowa, Captain John L. McCree watches the horizon. He wears a steel helmet and holds binoculars, but he's listening to the squawk box connecting him to the plot. He trusts the machine. He knows that the men below decks, the ones who will never see the enemy ship with their own eyes, are the ones who will kill it. The shells from the first salvo are nearing the end of their flight. They have traveled through the troposphere, freezing in the high altitude before arching back down toward the warm Pacific. They are traveling at supersonic speed, heavy enough to crush a destroyer simply by falling on it, even without the explosive filler. Downrange, on the deck of the light cruiser Katori, the lookout screams a warning. The sound of the incoming heavy shells is a distinct, terrifying noise. A sound like tearing canvas that deepens into a freight train roar. The water around the Katori erupts. The first salvo is a straddle. Giant white columns of water box the Japanese cruiser in. The shockwave of the near misses shakes the hull violently, knocking men off their feet. Saltwater cascades over the bridge. To the Japanese officers, this is a shock. A first salvo straddle at this range, through smoke, is statistically improbable in their world. They assume it is luck. A lucky guess by the American gunnery officer. They order a hard turn, confident that the next salvo will miss as the Americans struggle to correct. But in the main battery plot of the Iowa, there is no confusion. The radar operator sees the splashes surrounding the target pip. Straddle, he reports, his voice calm over the headset. No change. The rangekeeper hums. The solution is locked. The guns in the turrets are already reloading. The massive rammers shove the next projectiles into the breeches. The powder bags are thrown in. The blocks slide shut. Because the solution was perfect, the Iowa enters rapid fire. She does not wait to spot again. She begins to pump shells out as fast as the crews can load, roughly 2 rounds per minute per gun. The sky above Truk fills with steel. The tragedy of the Japanese position is that their doctrine, Kantai Kessen, relied on the idea of the decisive battle being a duel of skill. They believed their superior optical training gave them the edge. But they have brought a knife to a gunfight, and the gunfight is being managed by a calculator. The Iowa is not fighting with passion. She is fighting with an algorithm. The Mark 1A rangekeeper does not feel fear. It does not get tired. It does not flinch when the enemy fires back. It simply integrates the differential equations of ballistics and outputs a firing angle. As the second and third salvos leave the barrels, the concept of the invisible eye becomes a grim reality for the Katori. She is being stalked by a machine she cannot blind. The smokescreen, which her crew laid with such desperate hope, is useless. The darkness of the coming evening is useless. The speed of her engines is useless. She is trapped in the center of a radar beam, prisoner of American electrons. The blip on the green screen in the dark room has sentenced her to death. The men in the Iowa's plot make minor adjustments to the knobs, refining the data, sharpening the image. They are technicians of slaughter. The distance closes. The radar picture gets clearer. The separation between the target pip and the shell pips vanishes. The Katori is hit. The first 16-inch shell strikes the cruiser. It does not just damage the ship, it eviscerates it. The projectile weighs more than a compact car. It is moving fast enough to punch through the thin armor of the training cruiser as if it were paper. It detonates deep inside the machinery spaces. On the radar screen, the pip that represents the Katori seems to shudder. It glows brighter for a second, the radar reflection of the explosion plume, and then slows down. The invisible eye has done its work. The predictive fire has become effective fire. The illusion of the fortress of Truk, the illusion of the samurai spirit overcoming technology, is breaking apart under the weight of American industry and innovation. The engagement has only just begun, but the outcome has already been decided by the gears inside the gray box. The Japanese are fighting a war of heroism. The Americans are fighting a war of systems. And as the Iowa prepares to shift fire to the fleeing destroyers, the system is just getting warmed up. The physics of a battleship engagement are often described in the dry language of ballistics tables and penetration values. But to the men standing on the deck of the USS Iowa, the reality is an assault on the senses that borders on a religious experience. When the order, "commence firing," is executed, the ship ceases to be a vessel of transport and becomes a platform for a geological event. At 14,500 yards, roughly 8 miles, the target is visible to the naked eye as a gray silhouette against the darkening horizon. But the violence that bridges that gap is invisible until it arrives. Inside the 3 massive turrets of the Iowa, the gun captains press the firing keys. The electrical impulse travels to the primers. The broadside does not happen all at once. If all 9 guns fired at the exact same microsecond, the shockwave could interfere with the flight paths of the shells, causing them to disperse. Instead, they fire in a rapid ripple, separated by fractions of a second. To the human ear, however, it sounds like the cracking of the world's spine. A sheet of orange flame, hundreds of feet long, erupts from the barrels. The overpressure hits the superstructure like a physical hammer. Paint flakes off the bulkheads. Dust is shaken from the overheads in compartments 5 decks down. On the bridge, officers clamp their hands over their ears and brace their legs against the roll. The 58,000-ton ship actually slides sideways in the water, shoved by the recoil of her own weapons. Then comes the sound, a noise so loud it bypasses the ears and resonates directly in the chest cavity. It is a deep, percussive thud that feels like a blow to the heart. 9 projectiles, each weighing 2,700 pounds, are now airborne. They are traveling at 2,500 feet per second. They are not just lumps of metal, they are hardened steel penetrators filled with explosive D. As they tear through the atmosphere, they create a sonic boom that sounds like tearing canvas, a ripping noise that announces their arrival seconds before impact. On the receiving end, the crew of the Japanese light cruiser Katori is witnessing the end of their world. They are a training ship, a vessel designed to teach cadets navigation and flag etiquette. They are lightly armored, intended to withstand perhaps a 6-inch shell. They are facing 16-inch ordnance. The difference in scale is grotesque. A 16-inch shell is designed to punch through the thickest belt armor of a battleship like the Yamato. When it hits a light cruiser, it does not just penetrate, it obliterates. The first direct hit strikes the Katori on her port side. The shell punches through the hull plating as if it were wet cardboard. It travels deep into the ship, smashing through bulkheads, steam lines, and machinery before the base fuse detects the deceleration and detonates the explosive charge. The explosion is catastrophic. It is not a surface blast. It is a deep, internal heave that breaks the ship's structural spine. A column of fire and debris erupts from the funnel, shooting hundreds of feet into the air. The Katori shudders violently, her forward momentum arrested instantly as if she has run into a stone wall. But the Japanese crew possesses the discipline that Spruance and the American intelligence officers fear. Even as their ship is being disemboweled, they fight back. The Katori turns, heeling over hard, unmasking her torpedo tubes. The destroyer Maikaze, racing alongside her, does the same. They launch their long lances, the Type 93. Long lance torpedo is the most lethal underwater weapon of the war. Powered by pure oxygen, it leaves almost no wake. It carries a warhead of over 1,000 pounds of high explosive, nearly double the power of American torpedoes, and it has a range of over 20 miles. On the bridge of the Iowa, the lookouts scream the warning, "Torpedoes in the water, port bow." This is the moment of maximum danger. A battleship is invincible against gunfire from a cruiser, but a single long lance can blow the bow off or cripple the propellers. The Iowa is a massive ship over 800 feet long. Turning her takes time and miles of ocean. Captain McCrea orders right full rudder. The helmsman spins the wheel. The massive rudders bite into the slipstream. The Iowa leans into the turn, her deck angling steeply. She is combing the wakes, turning parallel to the path of the torpedoes to present the smallest possible target profile. The white streaks of the torpedoes pass down the side of the ship. One passes within 50 yards of the hull. The men on the deck watch it go, holding their breath. It is a reminder that the dinosaur on the horizon still has teeth. But the counterattack has failed. The torpedoes miss, and now the Iowa is angry. The range has closed to under 14,000 yards. The fire control solution is locked solid. The Iowa shifts to rapid fire. The turrets are pumping out shells every 30 seconds. The air around the Katori is filled with steel rain. The cruiser is hit again and again. A shell strikes the bridge, erasing the command structure. Another hits the aft turret, detonating the ready ammunition. The Katori begins to list heavily to port. She is burning from stem to stern. Smoke pours from her wounds, a thick, oily black cloud that merges with the twilight. This is not a battle. It is an execution. The Iowa is using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. It is a demonstration of the terrifying efficiency of the radar-directed gunfire. The shells are landing in tight patterns, clustering around the target with mathematical cruelty. To the north, the destroyer Maikaze is suffering a similar fate. The heavy cruisers Minneapolis and New Orleans have joined the engagement, pouring 8-inch fire into the smaller ship. The Maikaze is maneuverable, twisting and turning in the water, trying to chase the splashes, but the volume of fire is overwhelming. She is bracketed. Then she is hit. A boiler explodes. She loses power. She drifts to a halt, a burning wreck in the path of the American juggernaut. But Admiral Spruance is not looking at the burning ships. He is looking at the radar screen. There is one target left, the destroyer Nowaki. The Nowaki is commanded by a captain who understands the math of survival. He has seen the Katori broken. He has seen the Maikaze burning. He knows that to stay and fight is suicide. He orders flank speed. He turns his stern to the Americans and runs. The Nowaki is a fast ship, capable of 35 knots. She is fleeing into the darkening north, making smoke, zigzagging wildly. She is trying to open the range, to get beyond the reach of the radar, to hide in the coming night. The Katori is finished. At 14,500 yards, the Iowa delivers a final salvo. The shells strike the waterline. The cruiser rolls over. She capsizes rapidly, her red keel rising out of the water for a brief moment before she slides beneath the surface. There are few survivors. The violence of the 16-inch hits leaves little behind but oil and debris. Spruance ignores the sinking ship. He does not stop to pick up survivors. The war in the Pacific has hardened hearts. Submarines are waiting. The mission is to destroy the enemy fleet, not to conduct rescue operations. He orders the Iowa and New Jersey to shift targets. Pursue the destroyer. This command initiates the final, most surreal phase of the battle. The two most powerful battleships ever built are now chasing a single, fleeing destroyer. It seems absurd. Why expend 16-inch shells on a target so small? Why risk the battleships in a high-speed chase through waters that might be mined? The answer lies in the message Spruance wants to send. He wants to prove that no Japanese ship is safe anywhere, at any speed. He wants to demonstrate that the U.S. Navy can hunt you down even at the edge of the horizon. The Iowa vibrates as she winds up to 32 knots. The boilers are consuming tons of fuel oil per hour. The bow wave rises higher, washing over the foredeck. The chase is on. The Nowaki is a tiny pip on the radar screen, moving away fast. The range is opening 18,000 yards, 20,000 yards, 22,000 yards. Normally, a destroyer can outrun a battleship. But the Iowa is not a normal battleship. She was built to hunt fast cruisers. She hangs on the Nowaki's heels, refusing to let the gap widen too quickly. The sun has set. The sky is purple and black. The stars are coming out. The only light comes from the muzzle flashes of the Iowa's guns as she continues to fire. At this range, the engagement enters the realm of the theoretical. The Iowa is firing at a small, maneuvering target over the curve of the Earth. The lookouts can no longer see the Nowaki. Even the high directors are struggling to spot the fall of shot visually. They are relying entirely on the radar. The invisible eye watches the splashes. The Mark 1A rangekeeper calculates the lead. The barrels of the main battery are elevated to nearly their maximum limit. They are lobbing shells into the stratosphere, sending them on a ballistic arc that takes over a minute to complete. It takes 60 seconds for the shell to travel from the gun to the target. In that time, the Nowaki travels half a mile. The computer has to predict exactly where the destroyer will be based on her current zigzag pattern. It is a problem of probability and calculus. The Nowaki is fighting for her life. Her crew is watching the horizon behind them. Every minute or so, they see the flash of the guns. Then they wait. 60 seconds of silence. Then the sound of the freight train in the sky. Then the ocean erupts around them. The water spouts from the 16-inch shells are taller than the destroyer's mast. If a shell hits, the Nowaki will simply cease to exist. Even a near miss can crush the hull plates with the hydraulic hammer of the explosion. The range opens to 30,000 yards, 15 miles. Most navies would have ceased fire. It is a waste of ammunition. The probability of a hit is microscopic, but Spruance keeps the guns firing. He is pushing the system to its absolute limit. He wants to see what the Iowa can do. The Nowaki is running at 35 knots, her engines screaming. She is shaking apart from the vibration. Her captain is throwing the helm over, left, right, trying to be unpredictable. But the splashes keep coming. They are tracking him. The radar operators on the Iowa are in a trance state. They are watching the pips. They are calling the spots. They are fighting a video game war 40 years before video games exist. Range 32000, 16 miles. Range 34000, 17 miles. The gun barrels are pointed almost 45 degrees into the air. The recoil drives the ship down into the water. Then, at a range of roughly 35,700 yards over 20 miles, the Iowa fires a salvo that defies belief. The shells climb to a height of 30,000 feet, higher than Mount Everest. They freeze in the upper atmosphere. They begin their descent, accelerating to supersonic speeds. They fall toward the patch of ocean where the computer thinks the Nowaki will be. On the bridge of the destroyer, the captain watches the geysers erupt. They are close, too close. One lands just off the starboard beam. The shockwave lifts the destroyer out of the water. Men are thrown against the bulkheads. Shrapnel sprays the deck. It is a straddle. At a range of 20 miles, firing at a moving target in the dark, the USS Iowa has placed a salvo of shells around a destroyer. It is the longest range straddle in the history of naval warfare. It is a shot that should be impossible. It is the pinnacle of battleship gunnery. It is the moment where the technology of the big gun reaches its absolute zenith. Never before and never again will a ship fire so accurately at such a distance. But the Nowaki does not sink. She is damaged by the splinters. She is shaken. But she is not hit directly. She slips through the net. She disappears into the clutter of the radar return at extreme range. She survives. The Iowa checks her fire. The range is too great. The target is gone. Spruance orders the task group to turn back. He has made his point. He has destroyed a cruiser and a destroyer. He has proven that the lagoon is a trap. and he has proven that the Iowa can hit anything she can see on radar. As the great turrets rotate back to the center line, there is a sense of triumph on the bridge. They have set a record, they have won the engagement, but in the silence that follows the ceasefire, there is a subtle, nagging truth that will only become clear in hindsight. They fired dozens of 16-inch shells at the Nowaki. They had the best radar, the best computer, the best ship. They straddled her at 20 miles, and yet she got away. The steel rain was impressive, it was terrifying, but it was not absolute. The escape of the Nowaki is the first hint of the paradox that will haunt the battleship for the rest of the war. Perfection is not the same thing as effectiveness. The gun had reached its limit. The future belonged to the weapon that could chase the Nowaki beyond the horizon and not miss. The future belonged to the airplane. But for tonight, as the Iowa steams back toward the burning glow of Truk Lagoon, she is the queen of the ocean. She has roared, and the enemy has fled. The era of the battleship has one last, glorious sunset before the night falls forever. As the USS Iowa turns back toward the burning glow of Truk Lagoon, the destroyer Nowaki vanishes into the safety of the empty Pacific night. She is fleeing at 35 knots, her engines pushed beyond their red line, vibrating so violently that rivets are popping in her hull plating. She is escaping, but she is not unscathed. The splinters from the near misses of the 16-inch shells have scoured her decks like shrapnel from a fragmentation grenade. Her crew is shaken, deafened, and exhausted. They have just survived a duel with a god. The chase of the Nowaki represents a singular moment in naval history, a boundary line where the capabilities of the battleship reached their absolute asymptote. To understand why the Nowaki survived and why the engagement off Truk is studied by naval ballisticians to this day, one must look past the adrenaline of the pursuit and into the cold mathematics of extreme range gunnery. The shot that straddled the Nowaki at approximately 35,700 yards, roughly 20.3 miles, is widely considered the longest range straddle ever achieved by a battleship in combat. It broke the record set by the German Scharnhorst and the British Warspite. But the fact that it was a straddle and not a direct hit reveals the ultimate limitation of the gun as a weapon of war. At 20 miles, the Iowa is not aiming at a ship, she is aiming at a probability cloud. When a 16-inch shell leaves the barrel, it is subjected to atmospheric variances that no computer, not even the Mark 1A rangekeeper, can fully predict. A gust of wind in the upper stratosphere, a variation in air density, a slight difference in the temperature of the powder bags, these microscopic variables compound over a flight time of 60 seconds. By the time the shells arrive at the target area, they have dispersed. They do not land in a single point, they land in a pattern, an ellipse of destruction. At 35,000 yards, the natural dispersion of the Iowa's guns, the inherent inaccuracy of the system, is roughly 400 to 500 yards. The destroyer Nowaki is only about 130 yards long and 12 yards wide. Mathematically, the Iowa was firing a shotgun pattern that was larger than the target. The fire control solution was perfect. The radar tracking was flawless. The aim was true, but the laws of physics dictated that even a perfect shot had a high probability of landing in the water next to the ship rather than on it. The Nowaki survived not because the Americans missed, but because she was smaller than the margin of error of the most accurate guns ever built. This realization settles over the Combat Information Center of the Iowa as the order to cease fire circulates. The radar operators watch the pip of the Nowaki fade into the clutter of the sea return. There is a sense of frustration among the crew. They wanted a clean sweep. They wanted to sink every ship that came out of the pass. Watching the destroyer slip away into the dark feels like a failure. But to Admiral Spruance, standing on the bridge of the New Jersey, the escape of the Nowaki is irrelevant. He is a strategist, not a scorekeeper. The purpose of Task Group 50.9 was not to sink every single hull, it was to demonstrate dominance. By chasing a Japanese destroyer over the horizon with battleships, he has sent a message that will chill the blood of the Imperial High Command. He has proven that the U.S. Navy is willing to go anywhere and fight anything. The task group reforms. The Iowa and New Jersey, flanked by their cruisers and destroyers, turn south to rejoin the main carrier force. The mood on the ships shifts from the hyper-focus of combat to the heavy fatigue of the aftermath. The adrenaline crash is sudden. Men who have been humping 100-pound powder bags for an hour slump against the bulkheads. The smell of cordite hangs heavy in the humid tropical air, mixing with the smell of the fuel oil smoke. As they steam back toward Truk, the visual environment changes again. They are leaving the clean, empty darkness of the open ocean and returning to the scene of the massacre. The glow from the lagoon is visible from 40 miles away. It looks like a forest fire on the water. Inside the reef, the fire started by the carrier planes that morning are still burning. Tankers are exploding. Ammunition ships are cooking off, sending fireworks into the night sky. The contrast is stark. The surface action fought by the Iowa was a duel, a precise, linear engagement between warships. The scene inside the lagoon is a slaughter. It is the result of modern air power unleashed on a static fleet. It is messy, chaotic, and total. The Iowa passes the wreckage of the Katori. The cruiser has vanished, but the oil slick she left behind is spreading, calming the waves. There are few survivors in the water. The U.S. Navy, operating under wartime protocols and fearful of submarines, does not stop. The Iowa cuts through the debris field at high speed, her wake churning the flotsam of the enemy ship. For the intelligence officers on board, the night is just beginning. They gather in the wardroom to analyze the data. They review the radar plots. They check the ammunition expenditure logs. The numbers are staggering. The Iowa and New Jersey expended hundreds of rounds of main battery ammunition. They destroyed a cruiser and a destroyer in under an hour. They took no damage. The Japanese return fire was ineffective. The Iowa was never hit. But the most interesting data point is the reaction of the Japanese ships. The intelligence officers note that the Katori and Maikaze attempted to use smoke and maneuvering, tactics that worked in 1942. They did not seem to understand that they were being tracked by radar. They died playing by the old rules. This confirms a suspicion that has been growing in the U.S. fleet. The technological gap has widened to a chasm. The Japanese are falling behind. They are building bigger guns. The Yamato carries 18-inch rifles, but they lack the nervous system to use them effectively in the dark or at extreme range. The Iowa's radar has rendered the Japanese night fighting advantage null and void. However, amidst the celebration of the technical triumph, there is a subtle undercurrent of obsolescence. As the Iowa rejoins Task Force 58, she takes up her station next to the aircraft carriers. She is a magnificent sight, her silhouette bristling with guns, her hull undamaged. But she is positioned as a bodyguard. The carriers are the queens of the fleet. The battleships are the knights. The destruction inside Truk Lagoon, dozens of ships sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, was accomplished by airplanes. The surface action group destroyed 2 ships. The ratio of effectiveness is heavily weighted toward the air wing. The edge of the horizon that the Iowa fired at is a physical limit. A shell can only go so far. An airplane can fly hundreds of miles, drop a bomb, and return. The escape of the Nowaki highlights this limitation. If Spruance had sent planes after the destroyer, they would have chased her down and sunk her. The battleship had to let her go. This is the silent tragedy of the Iowa class. They are the perfect realization of the dreadnought concept. They are fast, tough, and lethal. But they have arrived on the stage just as the play is changing. They are the ultimate sword in an age of gunpowder. As the task force steams away from Truk the next morning, leaving the Gibraltar of the Pacific a smoking ruin, the Iowa's crew cleans the guns. They polish the brightwork. They restow the equipment. They are proud of their ship. They have crossed the T, in a sense, engaging the enemy surface fleet and winning decisively. But the Japanese High Command is about to draw a different lesson from the engagement. When the survivors of the Nowaki eventually reach port and file their reports, the shock in Tokyo will not be about the airstrikes. They expected air raids. The shock will be about the gunfire. The report will state that American battleships fired with uncanny accuracy through smoke and darkness at ranges exceeding 20 miles. It will confirm that the Japanese surface navy can no longer hide. It will force a reckoning within the Imperial Navy about the viability of their own super battleships, the Yamato and the Musashi. If the Americans can hit a moving destroyer at 20 miles in the dark, what chance does the Yamato have? The engagement off Truk was a tactical victory, but its legacy is strategic. It proved that the American industrial machine had solved the problems of naval gunnery. It proved that the U.S. Navy could integrate radar, computers, and ballistics into a unified weapon system. And yet, as the Iowa sails east, back toward the marshalling yards of Majuro, she is sailing away from the future. The future is taking off from the flight decks of the Enterprise and the Essex. The Iowa has reached the summit of the mountain, only to find that the sky belongs to someone else. The chase is over. The Nowaki is gone. The record is set. But the war moves on, indifferent to the perfection of the gun, hungry for the reach of the wing. As the smoke clears over the horizon of the Central Pacific, the destroyer Nowaki limps into the safety of the Japanese perimeter. She is a survivor, a witness to a massacre that has fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of the Imperial Navy. Her hull is scarred by shrapnel, her crew is traumatized by the concussion of near misses, and her captain carries a report that will send a tremor through the Naval General Staff in Tokyo. The escape of the Nowaki is often cited as a minor tactical failure for Admiral Spruance, a loose end left untied. But in the wider scope of the war, her survival is essential because of the story she brings home. The report filed by her officers details an engagement that defies the Japanese understanding of naval warfare. They report being tracked through smoke. They report being straddled by heavy caliber fire at ranges where the enemy ships were not even visible. They report a relentless, predictive accuracy that made maneuvering almost irrelevant. To the planners in Tokyo, this intelligence is devastating. It confirms their worst fears about American radar technology. For years, Japanese intelligence had known about American radar. They knew the frequencies, they knew the basic capabilities. But there is a profound difference between knowing a technology exists and understanding how it has been integrated into a weapon system. The Japanese viewed radar as a sensor, a way to find the enemy. The Americans viewed radar as a component of the gun. The engagement off Truk proved that the U.S. Navy had successfully fused the electronic eye with the mechanical brain of the fire control computer. The Iowa did not just see the Nowaki, she locked onto her with a mathematical grip that human reflexes could not break. This realization triggers a crisis of confidence regarding the ultimate weapon of the Imperial Navy, the Yamato. The Yamato and her sister ship, the Musashi, were built to win the war that the Iowa was designed to fight. Displacing over 70,000 tons and armed with 18.1-inch guns, they are the largest and most powerful battleships ever constructed. In a daylight engagement with clear visibility and calm seas, the Yamato is a monster that could theoretically crush the Iowa with superior weight of shell. But the lesson of Truk Lagoon is that the daylight engagement is a fantasy. The Americans choose when to fight. They fight at night. They fight in smoke. They fight from beyond the horizon. The Nowaki's escape proves that the Iowa can hit a maneuvering destroyer at 20 miles in the dark. Against a target as large and stable as the Yamato, the Iowa would likely achieve a first salvo straddle before the Japanese lookouts even spotted her masts. The doctrine of Kantai Kessen collapses not because of a lack of courage, but because of a mismatch in systems. The Japanese bet on the eye and the spirit. The Americans bet on the electron and the gear. The spirit broke under the weight of the steel rain. However, as the Iowa steams east to rejoin the carriers, a heavy irony settles over the ship. She has performed flawlessly. She has executed the most technically complex surface action in history. She has justified every dollar of her construction cost and every hour of her crew's training. And yet, she is already obsolete. The destruction of the fleet inside Truk Lagoon, the dozens of merchant ships, the tankers, the destroyers, was accomplished by aircraft. The Iowa sank a training cruiser and damaged a destroyer. The lethality gap between the gun and the airplane has widened to a chasm. The Iowa-class battleships are the fastest, most lethal surface combatants ever built. They are the apex predators of the ocean. But they have evolved to perfection at the exact moment their ecosystem is disappearing. There are no more great surface duels to fight. The Japanese fleet is being whittled away by submarines and airstrikes. The decisive battle will never happen because the U.S. Navy will not allow it to happen on Japanese terms. For the remainder of the war, the USS Iowa and her sisters will suffer the indignity of being overqualified bodyguards. They will use their massive anti-aircraft batteries to protect the carriers. They will use their 16-inch guns to bombard beaches in support of landings, turning their precision instruments into glorified artillery batteries. They will never again chase a cruiser over the horizon. They will never duel the Yamato. The fate of the ships involved in the Truk engagement tells the story of this transition. The Katori lies at the bottom of the Pacific, a victim of the gun. The Maikaze is with her. The Nowaki, the survivor of the 20-mile straddle, does not survive the war. She fights on, participating in the Battle of the Philippine Sea and the Battle of Leyte Gulf. But in October 1944, she is caught by American destroyers and torpedoed. She sinks with all hands. There is no escape from a navy that controls both the air and the sea. The Yamato meets her end in April 1945. She is not sunk by the Iowa in a thunderous clash of titans. She is swarmed by hundreds of carrier aircraft while on a suicide mission to Okinawa. She capsizes and explodes without ever sighting an American battleship. Her destruction is the final tombstone of the battleship era. But the Iowa survives. She survives World War II. She survives Korea. She survives Vietnam and the Cold War. She is reactivated again and again, a testament to the enduring utility of a massive, survivable platform. Even in the age of cruise missiles, there is a use for a ship that cannot be sunk. Today, Truk Lagoon is a silent place. The wrecks of the merchant fleet sunk by the airstrikes have become coral reefs, vibrant underwater gardens visited by divers from around the world. The violence of February 1944 has been reclaimed by the ocean. The oil slicks are gone, the smoke has dissipated. But if you look at the track charts of the battle, if you trace the line of the Iowa as she circled the atoll and turned north, you can see the geometry of the future. The engagement was a hinge point in history. It was the moment where the romance of the naval duel collided with the cold reality of electronic warfare. The USS Iowa proved that a battleship could be a precision instrument. She proved that you could hit what you could not see. She set a record for long-range gunnery that stands to this day, a record that will likely never be broken because no one will ever build a gun big enough to try. The paradox of the Iowa is that she was the perfect weapon for a war that ended the day she was launched. She was a masterpiece of the industrial age, sailing into the atomic age. As we look back on the events of February 17, 1944, we are left with a sense of awe for the machine and the men who operated her. They pushed the limits of physics. They turned the ocean into a firing range. They chased the enemy to the edge of the world. The Iowa sits today in Los Angeles, a museum ship. Her guns are silent, plugged, and painted. The radar screens are dark. But inside the armored plotting room, the brass gears of the Mark 1A Rangekeeper are still there, frozen in time, waiting for a solution that will never be needed again. The story of the engagement off Truk is not just a story of sinking ships. It is the story of the moment when the world realized that the eye was no longer enough, and that the horizon was no longer a limit. It was the final, thunderous roar of the old way of war echoing across the Pacific before the silence of the missile age began. The engagement off Truk Lagoon captures the specific melancholy of military obsolescence. There is something profoundly tragic about the perfection of the Iowa-class battleships. They were beautiful, terrifying, and intellectually brilliant machines, the culmination of centuries of naval architectural evolution. And yet, their defining moment was a chase that didn't matter strategically. The Japanese doctrine of Kantai Kessen failed not because it was cowardly, but because it was romantic. It relied on the human factor, the sharp eye, the brave heart, in an age where war had become an industrial process of radar pulses and analog computation. The Iowa didn't beat the Katori because her crew was braver. She beat her because her math was better. This story reminds us that technological superiority is fleeting. The Iowa was the future in 1944, but by 1945 she was the past. Today, we look at our own perfect weapons systems and wonder which ones are already obsolete, waiting for their own Truk Lagoon to reveal that the rules of the game have changed again. History moves fast. The wake of the Iowa has long since faded, but the lesson remains. In the race between the shield and the arrow always wins eventually. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing on the ocean is not the ship you can see, but the one that sees you first. If this deep dive into the technical history of the Pacific War meant something to you, we'd be honored to have you with us again. Until next time, stay curious and take good care.